Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going over my favorite books by Black authors. So in honor of Black History Month, I wanted to choose my top 30 books that I love by Black authors and kind of give y'all more of like a rapid fire recommendation video with all these recommendations. I have romance, I have horror, I have thriller, I have literary fiction, I have non-fiction, I have just a wide variety of genres. And also in this video, I really wanted to include Black booktubers, but I don't have enough time in my schedule to do two separate videos, and this video with 30 books alone is going to be long enough. So in the description box, I'm going to tag all my favorite Black booktubers down below. Please go follow them, please go like, please go support them. But honestly, like, the algorithm is racist, we know this, and there was a ton of support for Black creators during the Black Lives Matter movement back in 2020 when there was an upspike of people wanting to support the movement, and now everything has kind of died off and died down. So please make sure that you're supporting Black creators and you are watching diversely, reading diversely. It's really important to make sure that Black stories are getting told and Black creators are getting supported. So please make sure to read these books, support these creators, and not do this just during February when it's Black History Month, to do it all year round. I read diversely all year round. I watch these creators all year round. So make sure that you're also doing the same. Okay? Thanks. So these, as I said, are going to be more rapid fire recommendations because there is 30 books. Literally doing 15 books takes me almost 15 minutes to film. So doing 30 books, we would be here all day. So we're going to do these more rapid fire, and I'm going to try and cut down my rambling a little bit because I am a rambler. So first we're going to start off with romance. I just filmed my top romances. So a lot of these books are also in there, but there are books in here that are not in that video that I still really love, but they just didn't make it into that cut. So first off, I have What a Match and Make a Scene by Mimi Grace. These are the first two books in her Love Struck series, and I love them both. These are both boxer romances. We follow the romance of two different men that own a boxing gym, and we follow both their romances. One of them is with a baker who is next door to their boxing gym, and then the other one is with a woman that he has known and is the sister of his best friend that he runs the boxing gym with. Both of them are super cute, super fun. What a Match is actually my favorite, the second one, and I think that one's perfect for fall time. Both of them are phenomenal and I highly recommend. Then I have my top two Kennedy Ryans on this list, and that is Before I Let Go and Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. I've also read the first two books in the Grip trilogy, Flow and Grip, which I also really enjoyed, but these two are definitely my favorites. Before I Let Go is a second chance romance with a divorced couple that went through a very traumatic experience and kind of had blow after blow, so they got divorced and they're co-parenting and running a business together, but they are kind of drawn back to each other, and I love a second chance romance. This one is a phenomenal one. And so Long Shot is a very heavy book, so please make sure to check trigger warnings on any of these books. Even for Before I Let Go, that one has a lot of trigger warnings as well. So for any books that I mentioned on my channel ever, please make sure to check trigger warnings if you have any triggers that you need to be wary of. This one is a basketball romance, and we follow a woman who's with her partner in college, and he is on a basketball team, and he and this other guy are basically rivals. They go to different schools, and they also are both being like recruited professionally. So she goes to one of his games that is against this rival and comes across him, and she knows that that is the rival, but he does not know that she is his rival's girlfriend. So they kind of spend this one night together, and she's very drawn to him, but obviously she stays with the man that she was originally with. And turns out he's very abusive, very horrific towards her. And for the first half of this book, it's very heavy, very domestic abuse heavy, and then the second half is a romance with the rival. And it is so good if you can get through that domestic abuse part. It's so heavy and so traumatizing, but I think it's a story that needs to be told. Then I have Goal and Holding by Alexandria House. These ones are also hockey romances, so you can tell that I have a variety of sports in here. I love a sports romance, and I feel like sports romances are very common for Black authors to write because sports are very big within the Black community, but I've never seen hockey romances done before, and I was so happy when I found these. They are so phenomenal. I love Goal and Holding. Goal is basically about a man. All he does is live and breathe hockey, but he ends up having to take in his younger siblings that he never had a relationship with, and ends up hiring a nanny for them. And it's his romance with her, who she also has a lot of trauma in her past. Holding is another second chance romance of a divorced couple, and it's actually childhood enemies to friends to lovers. And so we see them when they're children or younger teenagers, and then see them present day. And I love that dual timeline. This one does have bipolar representation in it. I have bipolar too, and I wasn't a huge fan of the representation, which is why I prefer Goal, but I still recommend it, and I think it's a good good story overall. Then next up, I recommend Intercepted, which is the first book in the playbook series. I've only read the first two, but I loved the first one, Intercepted. It follows a woman who was dating an NFL player, but he ended up cheating on her, so she kind of has sworn off all NFL players. Then a new NFL player kind of comes into her life, and he is actually from her past as well. So this one is another second chance romance, and I love this one so much. It is so good. As you can tell, I have boxing, I have basketball, I have hockey, I have football. So I think I covered most of the sports there. So I hope that you guys can find a sports romance that you like by a Black author. Next up, I have Vanessa Jared's Got a Man, and this one is about Vanessa Jared, and she is a 40-something-year-old woman who is a divorcee, and she is kind of living her life as like a sexy single woman. She's in this club with her friends that they call like the Sexy Singles Club, and she's just doing her life. She's just doing her. But then a man shows up on her doorstep 2 years after her divorce, and he's actually a sheriff, and he wants her help because he knows that the man that she divorced is actually engaged to her sister and is kind of conning her a little bit, because he obviously did some background investigation, and he is telling everybody that Vanessa Jared is dead when she's most certainly alive. So she actually wants nothing to do with it, but then she sees that the fiance that he's now engaged to is wearing her grandmother's wedding ring that she used to wear as well. She wants her family heirloom back, so she decides to team up with the sheriff to basically bring down her ex and show that he is lying to everybody. This one is obviously a romance between her and the sheriff. It has forced proximity, and it's so good. Next up, I have Getting Schooled by Christina C. Jones, and this one follows a woman who ends up taking a position to be a grad student underneath her mom at this university, and she's like a grad assistant for a class. She comes across this man who's in the class who's actually older than her. He's 28, and he is a retired veteran. He actually is an amputee as well, so there's representation for that. They both basically infuriate each other a lot, but they're both really attracted to each other, and it's their romance. It's so good. It's set on a college campus with older students, which I really enjoyed. Next up is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is one of my favorite romances. This one is definitely more emotional. We follow a writer who writes erotica fiction, and we also follow another writer who writes literary fiction. So they actually meet at a literary book event, but turns out they actually knew each other 2 decades prior when they were teenagers, and they spent this week together where they were basically like, I keep describing it as they're like raw open wounds. This book is so raw and heartfelt, and they're literally like open wounds, okay? They are so broken, but they try to heal each other the best that they can, but it just doesn't work out. But now we follow them present day as they are reconnecting, and we get both timelines, and it's just such a beautiful story. Next up, I have Rafe and Zenny, which are the first 2 books in the Loose End series. I believe the 3rd one's coming out later this year. I prefer Zenny, but Rafe is also really good. Rafe follows a woman who is a doctor, and she has 2 twin girls. She is trying to just live her life after a really bad breakup. As they're getting used to their new life, their live-in nanny actually bails on them. So she's trying to find a new nanny, and she comes across this man named Rafe. And he is very handsome. He's bearded. He's tall. He's really tattooed, but he's also really gentle and kind-hearted. So he ends up becoming their nanny, and her and him can't resist their attraction to each other. This one's definitely a really fun nanny romance, and I've never read a nanny romance with a man as the nanny, so I really enjoyed that kind of twist on it. Zenny follows a woman who her aunt has recently passed away and left her a ton of money, and to get her inheritance she actually has to marry somebody, and her aunt had somebody in mind, which is a Scotsman that was really close to her aunt, and our main character and the Scotsman end up getting married. And this one is definitely like a marriage of convenience type situation. I just want to read this little part from Goodreads. It says it features a woman sick to death of her family's shit and a plus size Scotsman who just wants to make sweet music and love. It is so like just fun and cute. Next up, I have Drag Me Up by R.M. Virtues, and this one has trans representation in it, and the author is trans as well. And this one follows Hades, who runs a casino with his brother Zeus, and he kind of takes all the work, and like nobody even knows that he actually really exists, but he prefers it that way because he really wants to preserve his solitude. And then we follow Persephone, who has gotten out of the clutches of Demeter, but she is now in debt to Zeus for trusting him, and she actually is a main lead in this kind of like circus that performs at the casinos. So that's how Hades and Persephone meet. And I love when it says this. It says that he gives her a soft place to land and she makes him want to reach for the stars. And that really describes their dynamic. So this one is a modern day Persephone and Hades retelling. And lastly, for romance, I have Dirty Kisses by Kenya Wright. This one is a mafia romance. I try to give a little something for all the different girlies. So this one follows a mafia boss and his top washer got killed, and he is literally like one of the most deadliest men alive. So he is pissed, okay? He is mad. So he ends up confronting this woman about it because he believes that her brother was involved in the murder of his top washer, and she's also a really high profile washer. So she ends up having to wash his money, and he has like this allure to him, but he's very dangerous, and they have to kind of trust each other before more people end up dead. This one is really good. I did not enjoy the second book in this series, but the first one is so good, so I highly recommend it. Now we're gonna move on to horror and thriller. First up, we have All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I recommend all of S.A. Cosby's work, but this one is my favorite, so this is the one that I put on the list. We follow a black sheriff in a town, and there is a call one day of this shooting at the school where basically an ex-student shot a teacher, and then he was killed by the police. So they have no explanation for why this student decided to kill this teacher. So our main character, the detective, begins to investigate, and he kind of finds out that there may be some darker things lurking in this town that this teacher may be related to. This one is very dark and heavy, so again, I would recommend looking at the trigger warnings, but it is just so good. I know people don't like detective perspectives, but I love them, and I love like this is my favorite detective book of all time. Next up, I have Nana by Brandon Massey, and this one is a really fun one. It follows a woman who never knew her birth mother, and she was raised by adoptive parents. But one day a woman shows up basically claiming to be her mom, and she accepts her with wide open arms and is so happy to have her birth mother in her life. So she moves into the household and is like cleaning, helping with her kids, cooking them meals, all this different stuff. But one day their dog ends up dead, and so our main character actually ends up falling ill as well, but her birth mother, aka Nana, ends up kind of taking care of her. But every day she begins to look more youthful, more vibrant, more beautiful, and our main character's husband just knows something is up, so he begins to launch an investigation to actually look into this woman, and she is not all that she seems. This one is very kind of insane and crazy and has a lot of like family domestic drama woven in with this like kind of almost like supernatural sci-fi element that was super amazing, and it was horrific, definitely. Next up, I have Cirque Berserk, and this one follows a group of teenagers, and they decide that after their senior day it was super boring, so they decide to do something else. And that thing is that they are going to go to this place called Cirque Berserk, which is a shut down kind of like carnival like theme park place. And it was actually shut down because back in the 80s there were a group of teenagers that worked at Cirque Berserk that went on a crazy killing spree. These teenagers actually disappeared without a trace, and so people kind of had different theories of what happened to them. Some people believe they're still alive because murders still happen around Cirque Berserk to this day. So these teenagers end up going to Cirque Berserk, and as I say every single time I talk about this book, then slicing and dicing happens. So there is some killing in this, but I feel like it has a lot more depth. We get an indigenous character, we get a black character, we got a lot of depth and nuance, we get perspectives in the 80s, we get perspective present day. This book is just so well rounded and overall such a good read. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Next up, I have Jackal by Erin E. Adams. This one is such a phenomenal one. We follow a woman who is going back home, and she's really not excited to do this because she is from a predominantly white neighborhood in Pennsylvania, but her best friend is getting married, so she's like, you know what, I'm grown, I can handle this, I'm gonna go home. So she goes home for this wedding, and on the night of the wedding, the bride's daughter ends up disappearing into the middle of the woods. So they begin investigating, obviously, to try and figure out where this little girl went. But our main character kind of realizes that this is familiar because back when she was a teenager, a girl kind of went into the woods with a random man, and she was found with her chest cavity ripped open and her heart taken out. So she definitely notices that there's a pattern, and she begins to investigate herself and finds out that black girls have been disappearing in these woods for years. This one is such a good one that talks about the disappearance of black girls and how that is such a big issue. I love this one so much. It's phenomenal. Next up is Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler, and this one just basically follows a girl who wakes up and she has amnesia, so she does not remember anything about who she is, what's going on, but she has inhuman needs and stuff like that. So she ends up discovering that she's actually a like 50-something-year-old genetically modified vampire. So she's trying to learn about her former stolen life, but then also is on this quest to figure out who tried to destroy her and is still trying to destroy her to this day. This one is such a little good vampire, kind of almost sci-fi novel. I really enjoyed this one a lot, and I can't wait to read more of Octavia E. Butler's work. When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen is also a phenomenal one. This one is kind of similar to Jackal in the way that this one revolves around a wedding, but this one takes a completely different route to it. So we follow our main character, and she actually grew up in a segregated town. So she also has a best friend who is white, and she ends up going back for her best friend's wedding. But her best friend's wedding is actually taking place on a plantation, and they've tried to erase this history that happened there, but the ghosts of the slaves that were tortured on this land still roam, trying to get their retribution. This one is fantastic. I absolutely loved the commentary that it had. If you are Black and you're watching this video, this one honestly, out of all the books I'm recommending for horror, is like the most triggering for me, because it literally is about slaves on a plantation. But if you can handle the triggers and you can handle it, I would really recommend this one because it is so good. Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark is another really phenomenal one. I love this one so much. So this one begins in 1915, where the movie The Birth of a Nation comes out, which if you don't know about that movie, it's a very racist movie. I would look into the history if you don't know about it, but basically that movie casts a spell across America, and it turns Ku Klux Klan members into these demons, or like the Ku Klux Klan has these demons and they exist to this day. So now there is a group that we are following of Black women that are going around killing these Ku Klux demons, and it is so fun. And we follow this group of just badass women killing these racist demons, and it's just so fun, but also like really important at the same time. I also have another author to recommend, and that is Tiffany D. Jackson. I love all of her work, and I have a guide to her up on my channel, but my favorite book of hers is actually The Weight of Blood, which I don't think is in my guide to her because I'm pretty sure I did that guide before this book came out, but I love this one so much. This one is a retelling of Carrie. So we follow a teenager that is raised in basically a predominantly white town, but there is some Black people, and it is very much racist. She's actually raised by her white father, and her Black mother is nowhere to be seen, and she is white passing, so she chooses to pass as white because of her father's pressures. So she even doesn't even go outside when it's raining or anything like that. Like, she stays home from school because her hair is gonna puff up from all the humidity. But one day she gets caught in the rain and her hair puffs up, and everybody then knows that she's like mixed. So people start to bully her and everything like that. So the school decides to host their very first integrated prom, because in present day still there are places that don't host official proms, and the white people all throw a prom together and don't invite any Black people, and it's segregated in that way. So the school in this decides to host its first official integrated prom, and it doesn't go the way that you would hope it would go, because this is a retelling of Carrie, and this one is very accurate to Carrie, but makes it way better. And you could tell that Tiffany D. Jackson really truly loves writing, and she pays attention to every single word that she puts on the page. Next up, I have The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval, and this one is another really fun one. I believe this one takes place in 1920s New York. Don't quote me on the time period, but it's definitely like more historical. And we follow this man who basically like sells these kind of magical artifacts, and one day he gets this tome that he sells to this sorceress, and this opens up a door to a magical realm, and he kind of earns the attention of things that are best left sleeping. This one is pretty short, but it is so good and it packs a punch. And lastly, for the thriller and horror category, I have Flowers of the Sea by Zin E. Rockland. This is one that I had a really good time with. It's not my favorite, but I would definitely recommend it. I gave it 3.5 stars. This one follows a group of people who are from a flooded kingdom that are stuck on an ark together, and they can't really like have children, but our main character, she's actually pregnant. So she is basically put on a pedestal in this kind of society, but her baby actually might be more than human. So the horror kind of comes from that baby. This one obviously has to do with a lot of different things too, with Black people on a boat and like the trauma that comes with that. And I thought this one was just beautifully done, even though it wasn't my absolute favorite. Sorry, this is actually the last one for thriller and horror, and that is The Year of the Witching by Alexis E. Henderson. She also has another book that was good, but it wasn't my favorite, so I'm choosing this one to put on the list. This one follows a girl who is ostracized from her community because her mother actually had a child with an outsider, and this is a really religious community where you aren't supposed to do that, and she is obviously the product of that. So she is very much ostracized from this community, and her mother was also kind of shunned upon because she was drawn to this forest at the edge of the community that people aren't allowed to go into, and she went in there over and over and over again. And now our main character is also being drawn to the same forest that might hide some darker secrets, and she may find out a little bit about her father in there as well. So this one is really good. It is YA, but I absolutely loved it when I read it, and it has stuck with me to this day even though I read it a couple years ago. Next up, we have literary fiction and contemporary fiction. So I have Sky Falling by Mia Mackenzie, and this is one that my mom actually recommended to me, and this one was really good. It follows a woman who basically just travels all the time, and she never really settles down, and people are really worried about her, but she just kind of lives her life how she does. And when she is visiting at home one time, this 12-year-old girl comes up to her and is like, "I'm your egg," because she had a best friend, and her best friend was having fertility issues, so she donated her egg to her friend so she could have a child. So now she's confronting the relationship that she has with this child, and she's not really her mother, but her actual mother has also passed away. So it becomes very complex and nuanced, and this little girl definitely wants her to be a part of her life. So she decides to stick around for a little bit longer this time, and also has some kind of complex feelings for the aunt of this little girl as well. This one is definitely a really good literary fiction pick. Next up, I have Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. This one is literally one of my favorite books of all time. I can't even express to you how much I truly love this story. This one is part memoir, part magical realism, and I feel like there isn't much plot to explain with this one, but there is a part on Goodreads that I feel like really shows what the story is about. It's just heavily autobiographical and infused with magical realism. Black Girl Unlimited fearlessly explores the intersections of poverty, sexual violence, depression, racism, and sexism, all through the arc of a transcendent coming of age. I've never read a memoir that was also kind of fictionalized in the way that it has this magical realism, but this magical realism literally is used as this girl going through to a different world, and she can travel between these two worlds, and this other world is basically her protecting herself from all the horrors of real life. And this one talks about every single issue that Black girls go through in such a beautiful, nuanced way. If you want one book on this list that is going to show you the struggles that Black girls and Black women go through, this is definitely going to be one of them. I have a couple other ones coming up in the nonfiction. If you're looking for one that's a little bit more like fantasy literary fiction, this is going to be a really, really good pick. We also have another author to recommend, and that is Elizabeth Acevedo. I have read all of her young adult work and loved it. I haven't read Family Lore yet, but I'm really excited to. And the one that I really want to recommend for this is With the Fire on High. This is my favorite one of hers. We follow, I believe her name is Imani, and she is a high school senior, and she has a daughter, so she has to take care of her, but she has the help of her abuela, and she has to make a lot of tough decisions for the sake of her child. But the one thing that she can't let go of is being in the kitchen, and she really wants to go on this trip to Spain with her class, but she can't afford it. And this one really just follows Imani throughout her everyday life. It does have a little bit of romance in it as well, and it is just so good seeing a Black girl have so much support and so many people backing her, but also shows like the struggles of everyday life and like the realness of being a Black girl in America. And lastly for this category, I have The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. And this one is about a boy who comes to terms with his mixed race gay identity. And then at university, he decides to get into drag, and he wears these pink feathers and is called like the Black Flamingo. And this one is really a story about uniqueness and basically letting yourself be yourself and being true to who you are. And it's actually told in poetry, which is such a really cool, fun touch to this story. Now we're moving on to fantasy, and Black Girl Unlimited could also fit into this category as well, but the first official one I have for this category is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This one follows the descendants of African slaves that were tossed overboard during slavery, of course, when they were traveling from Africa to America, and they have actually built their own underwater society. And we follow one main character who actually holds all of the memories of her ancestors, and nobody else in the community really knows how they came to be. They don't really know all of their trauma and history, but she does, and she's the historian, and she really carries that weight with her every single day. And because this is so heavy on her, she actually flees to the surface to try and forget what happened in the past. But while she's there, she realizes that her people actually need to reclaim their past and who they truly are. This one is so poignant and really hits home, and I never really read anything that talked about this. This is one of my favorite ocean books. If you know me, I love the ocean and I love ocean work, and this is definitely one of my favorites. Then I have Secrets and Truths by Whitney Hill, and this is a fantasy romance that has to do with a half elven, half human bounty hunter who's sent to North Carolina after being exiled basically for getting in trouble back at home. And she definitely has a target on her back, and she actually ends up meeting this man in a Raleigh nightclub who is a vampire and seeks blood that is more powerful than most humans can give. And all the other worlds are off limits except for the human blooded, which our main character is, even though she's half elven. So she kind of has that power. So she is the perfect target for this vampire. So it is their romance, and it's really good. She's definitely a very kick-ass main character, which I loved. And this actually takes place in my hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina. So I love to see it. And lastly for this category, I actually have a middle grade, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers. I really love this one. This one follows a girl, and her brother has actually gone and disappeared, and she's very worried about him, and nobody really wants to look into it because the police kind of think he was involved in something illegal. But she actually finds like this briefcase in her brother's room, and it has something in it for her where she could try out for this Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. And she didn't even know that there was a supernatural side to life, but there's mermaids and dwarves and all these other magical creatures that she had no idea about. Now she's going to try out for the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs and try and get into their school because she thinks it'll lead to where her brother is and help her find out what happened to him. This one is like such a fun middle grade that I had such a good time reading. I love all the fantasy elements in this world, and that there was like this Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. I thought that was so cool, but also it has a lot of commentary as well. And lastly, I have the nonfiction genre. I have two, and I'm really not good at describing nonfiction, so I have their synopses pulled up on Goodreads in front of me, so if I'm looking down, that's why. But the first one is Black Girl Call Home, which is one that I read last year and loved. So this one's actually a poetry collection about race, feminism, and queer identity. Each poem explores what it means to be a daughter of America and the painful, joyous path to adulthood as a young queer Black woman, who I literally am, so I really resonated with this story. It is a love letter to the wandering Black girl and a vital companion to any woman on a journey to find truth, belonging, and healing. This one is phenomenal, and it had so much like real life stuff in it, like a lot of pop culture and like a lot of modern day issues that we have today are in this one, and it was just so good, and I loved the audiobook. And lastly is another must read, and that is Hood Feminism. And this is the nonfiction if you want to learn about the issues of Black women and how white feminism is not cutting it. It says, today's feminist movement has a glaring blind spot, and paradoxically, it is women. Mainstream feminists rarely talk about meeting basic needs as a feminist issue, argues Mika Kendall, but food insecurity, access to quality education, safe neighborhoods, a living wage, and medical care are all feminist issues. All too often, however, the focus is not on basic survival for the many, but on increasing privilege for the few. Moreover, prominent white feminists broadly suffer from their own myopia with regards to how things like race, class, sexual orientation, and ability intersect with gender. How can we stand in solidarity as a movement, Kendall asks, when there is a distinct likelihood that some women are oppressing others? Period. This one is about intersectionality, which is literally like what one of my majors is about. As a criminology major, that is what we talk about all the time. Sociology is intersectionality over and over and over and over again. And I feel like that is not something talked enough about in the modern day society. So this is the one. You need to read this one. You have to read it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and you got some recommendations. So if you made it to the end, leave the brown heart emoji down below, and I'll see y'all in my next one. Bye, everybody. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking the moments we live in. Yeah, you got the nerve to be on me, faking your life for the IG. If you got my number, don't add me, 'cause baby, I'm on hiatus. I'm on hiatus.